Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of Talking Cardboard. My name is Cory, and as always, if you like the content and what we are all doing here on the channel, please consider subscribing. We really appreciate it. And as always, if you leave comments below, we will definitely get back to you. We love the back and forth chat. With that, let's get to today's video. Today's episode, I discuss 5 of some of the very first board games I purchased while entering the hobby, and also some of the replacements that do similar things to these games that have now kind of replaced those games for me in my collection today. Some of these games that replaced the older games do similar things, but in my opinion, do them better. So let's get right into it. So the first game on my list today was actually the very first game I ever bought, and that game is Munchkin. Munchkin is a very light take-that style game where you're literally flipping over a card to see if it's basically an item or a monster and dealing with that situation as it arises. It's very luck-driven, very take-that, very in-your-face, kind of slapstick sort of fun. A couple of the games that replaced Munchkin for me today are Villainous, either the Marvel or Disney, either one just fine, or Imperial Settlers. My reasoning for choosing Villainous and or Imperial Settlers to replace Munchkin are because they do somewhat similar things but in much better ways. Both Imperial Settlers and Villainous deal with cards and have a little bit of a take that element, but it's not such a heavy take that element that that Munchkin relies on so much. Munchkin is basically, you've got cards in your hand and you can completely mess over your opponents just by playing one card on top of their plan and completely thwarting their entire plan. In Villainous and Imperial Settlers, you've got a little bit of that, where in Villainous you've got this hero deck of cards that you can do an action to kind of hinder some of your opponent's plans, but it doesn't completely mess them over for the majority of the game. It's not a complete take that. It's almost just kind of a slowdown mechanism, and they can do that right back to you whenever they choose to, so there's no luck involved with the take that in Villainous at all. It's all choice and strategy driven. In Imperial Settlers, you have a little bit of that as well, where you're building out a kingdom of cards in front of you. Both you and or your opponents can choose the raise action, which can destroy some of their buildings to help you get resources, but that's really difficult to do. The raise tokens are really hard to come by, so you're only really doing that a few times throughout the entire game. It's not something that's happening almost every turn like in Munchkin. So Villainous, Imperial Settlers, both really fun card games with a little bit of a take that element, but definitely more strategy driven than just pure luck of the draw. On to my next game. This game kind of fills the deck building genre. My second game I ever purchased, and that game was Dominion. Dominion, the classic deck building game where literally the whole time all you're doing is adding cards to your deck. You're buying cards to eventually get to the point where you're buying these point cards that you can put into your deck. Then the person with the most points at the end of the game wins. The cool thing for me about Dominion when I first purchased it was it's just a very smooth playing game, very easy to pick up and understand, and once you really get the gist of it down, it really flows nicely, and you're buying point cards to help you win by the end of the game, but as you're purchasing those point cards, they go straight to your deck, which when you draw them, do nothing for you during the game, but at the end of the game, that's how you win. So it slows you down if you buy points too quickly and add those to your deck. But the two games that I chose that kind of replaced Dominion for me nowadays is either Clank or Star Realms. So Clank, Star Realms, they're both deck building games as well. I'll just kind of touch up on Clank first. Clank was the very first deck building game where they added a board to it. So you're purchasing cards for your deck just like in Dominion, but instead of adding those point cards to your deck like in Dominion that clog up your deck, you're actually using cards to manipulate a character on a board, and you're sending one of your characters down into a dungeon, trying to stay clear of the dragon, and as you're playing cards on certain places on the board, you're actually purchasing these items that give you points, and the items stay off to the side of the board. So the points in this game don't actually clog up your deck. You're just out there gathering different items and and cards to help you do that, and then get back out of the dungeon before the dragon completely collapses the whole thing. So that's a neat little twist on what Dominion did so well to begin with, but adds a few other elements to the game that really help elevate it for me. Star Realms, another deck building game it's more of just a 1v1 style game where you're trying to get your opponent's health from 50 down to 0, and they're trying to do that to you. The first person to get their health down to 0 wins, but it's a really neat twist to everything, where they have these base cards as well. So instead of it being vertically oriented, the base cards are horizontal, and those cards you can play in front of you as a defensive mechanism where your opponent needs to get through those cards before they can come and hit you directly. So it's a nice twist to the deck building genre, where you're not only just deck building for points like in Dominion, but you're also trying to purchase cards to trigger different factions and get these base cards to help defend you against to slow down your opponent, and you're doing multiple things on top of just the deck building itself. So that is why I chose either Clank or Star Realms as my replacement to Dominion. Alright, and on to the third game on my list today. It was actually the third game I ever purchased in the hobby, so far we're going right in order. The last two games actually weren't purchased in chronological order like these first three, but this third game fills the worker placement void for me. That worker placement mechanism that I love so much, and this game that I bought early on was Stone Age. Stone Age, still a fantastic game to this day. Easily makes my top 50 games of all time, if not my top 20 still. I don't remember what it was last year, and I don't know what it'll be on this year's list coming up in 2021. But Stone Age is a fantastic game. But a couple of the game options that I tend to go for now instead of Stone Age are either Viticulture or Raiders of the North Sea. So Viticulture, the Essential Edition, Tuscany expansion also makes it better, but you definitely need that Viticulture Essential Edition. Kind of a funny story, the first time I bought Viticulture was the first version of the game, and I just hated it. I did not like it at all, but that Essential Edition fixed a couple of the things that really were negatives for me, that elevated the game from maybe a 5 or a 5.5 up to now it's at least a 9 out of 10 for me. So Viticulture, a fantastic game where you've got worker placement just like in Stone Age, but you're also manipulating these different tracks of grapes, and you're going through the entire process of running your own vineyard and making your own wine to fulfill contracts for points. In this game, you're actually going out to the fields and gathering grapes for your crush pads, and you're crushing the grapes into juice to put into the cellars, have them ferment before they turn into wine, and then you're also gathering these different contracts from all these various companies and people that want to buy your wine from you, and they're looking for specific types of wine. Also, Raiders of the North Sea, not only do you place a worker to take an action, but after you place that worker, you then get to pick up a different worker for a second action on your turn. And just that mechanism alone really elevates the game a lot for me, because you are deciding on 2 actions on your turn. But not only that, you have to do it in order of put down a worker first and then pick up a different worker. So sometimes the way that pattern works out doesn't necessarily work in your favor. So you really have to keep that in mind when you're looking to maximize your turns. So Raiders of the North Sea and Viticulture kind of replace Stone Age for me nowadays. Alright, and moving on to the fourth game on my list. This was the first cooperative game I ever purchased, and that is Pandemic. Obviously a widely known game in the hobby nowadays. It's seen in big box stores everywhere. Everybody knows of Pandemic. But the 2 games that replace Pandemic for me today would be either Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition or Mechs vs. Minions. I could go with either one over Pandemic. Pandemic got a little bit old after multiple plays over the years because you're doing the same 4 actions every turn. You are going around the board with a worker, and you are picking up disease cubes around the board and trying to get them off the board in the most efficient pattern possible. Once you get a disease of a specific color off the board, you are using these cards that you are set collecting for those colors to then turn into one of the buildings on the board that you had built to exterminate the disease and find a cure for it. There is a lot of luck in the game to the disease cards that you draw and where these diseases are coming up, so it doesn't feel like you necessarily have a ton of strategy every time you play. So The other two games that replaced it, Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition, we'll talk about that one here first. Similar thing, cooperative. We were going through and discovering new tiles through this haunted mansion, and it's really cool because it's app driven. So the app has an ambiance style music in the background as you're playing. It's got this really cool narrative, and the missions are very cohesive, and the storyline that they tell, it's a very linear storyline. But what's really cool about Mansions of Madness is that you can choose the same mission over and over again, and each time the app randomizes what clues are placed where and what rooms pop up when and what different creatures are in different rooms. So even if you have played the same scenario a few times, if you want to play with a new group of gamers again for that 4th time, you can go ahead and do that because it'll still be fresh to you. It won't get old because it'll be completely random. So you can enjoy it the 4th and 5th and 6th time with a new group of people without having to worry about it. And the second game I mentioned was Mechs vs. Minions, which is also a cooperative game, but it's got a twist. It's got a programming twist to the game, where you are all working cooperatively to get these minions off of the board and basically not die from them attacking you, but you're working as a team to program cards in front of you. And whatever pattern and whatever order you program your cards in front of you, the cards actually go off in the order that you had sent them in. So if you had turned your character a certain way to then fire upon one of the minions to try to kill that minion, but your opponent had pushed that minion out of the way before you, you still have to go through the pattern of your programmed cards in front of you. So you still have to fire off. But because your partner may have, let's say, pushed the minion out of the way to begin with to get them closer to somebody else, your shot actually misses. But you're playing cooperatively, so it doesn't really feel like too big of an issue when somebody throws you off your plan, because it's all in good fun. It's not like you're trying to go after each other. You're all working toward the same mission, but you're doing it with a fun twist of programming your cards to see what happens. So that is Mechs vs. Minions and Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition that replaced Pandemic. Okay, and the last genre of game I chose on my list is kind of the real-time dice rolling genre, a genre that doesn't get talked about a ton. And I think for good reason. It's definitely one of my least favorite genres ever, but there have been a couple of games that I've really enjoyed with this genre. The first game I actually picked up that had the real-time aspect of dice rolling and really stressful and trying to roll those dice out quickly to get the job done before the time runs out was the game called Escape. Escape the Cursed Temple. And the game that actually replaced Escape for me nowadays is Project Elite. More specifically, the 2nd edition is the one I played. But talking about Escape a little bit here, you set basically a 10-minute timer, and you're frantically going through this temple, trying to pick up the necessary gems in order to unlock the final door to get out of the temple. The twist is that you're not only searching for these gems and picking them up, but you're also searching tiles throughout the temple too. So when you reveal a new tile, you don't know where that tile is going to lead until you flip it over. And when you connect it to the board, that could throw you off in a completely different direction. 2 different times throughout that 10-minute timer, there'll be a sound on the timer that tells you that you have a certain amount of time to get back to the main room in the center of the temple before all the doors close. And if you can't get back in time, then you lose some dice, so you get less dice to roll for the future rounds. If that 10-minute timer runs out, you get locked in the temple forever, and you're done, and you lose the game. So the game that replaced it for me nowadays that brings the stress level down a little bit but still keeps that tension in the game is Project Elite. So in Project Elite, it is frantic dice rolling. It is real time, just like an Escape, but the timer is only set for 2 minutes. So you're actually playing 8 rounds of 2 minutes each. And in those 2 minutes, it's your action phase where you're rolling out dice to try to load up your weapons and try to fire upon these aliens that are invading your space. And if the aliens get to certain checkpoints or into your base, you lose the game. So you're trying to defend your base and also work toward a common goal. Once the 2 minutes are done, you can put down your dice, I'll take a nice deep breath and get relaxed again, so you relieve some of that stress, re-strategize what's going on. Then the aliens have their phase where they're actually moving, more aliens are spawning, they do their attacks and such on you to see how much damage you take, or if they hit you, if they're in line of sight, and then you set the timer for 2 minutes again and start the next round. So that's what I really like about Project Elite, is that it's not a straight 10 minutes of tension and stress like an Escape. It feels fresh, it feels fun, just a joy to play. Even if you lose, it's a lot of fun to play. So that is Project Elite replacing Escape the Cursed Temple. Well, that does it for today's list of my 5 games that I bought early on in the hobby, and then some of the games that have replaced those games for me today. I hope you enjoyed the list, and with that, you all have a great day.